the Ukrainians themselves are saying that they are engaged in the battle for Bakhmut at this moment to use up as many of Russia's resources as possible, so ammunition and human life. Is that a cost worth paying? Because the Ukrainians must be suffering as well.
No, I don't think it's the cost was worth paying. I mean, as your report clearly suggests, it's not the Russian regulars that actually participate in the battle for Bakhmut. Yes, there are elements of the Russian regular military that are engaged in the fighting, but the majority of the fighting is carried out by the members or the militants of the Wagner group. And that makes a huge difference, because regardless of the human cost that the Russians may be sustaining whilst charging at the Ukrainian positions, it won't count towards the regular combat fatalities of the Russian military. And that what really makes this whole battle a very significant and also incredibly costly to the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians themselves admit that they're losing a company a day, a battalion a week. And if we just think for a moment, the company is basically an organization of between 80 to 120 troops. Battalion, we're talking about 500 to 700 troops strong military unit. So it's a very significant losses. And clearly, the other important element that we need to take into account, the sheer size of the Ukrainian military compared to the sheer size of the Russian military. The Russians haven't rolled out their reserves, including the bulk of the mobilization force that they have assembled in late last year. So whilst for the Ukrainians, Bakhmut has become the symbol of resistance, for the Russians, it's an opportunity to chew up all the available firepower that the Ukrainian military can throw at this stronghold in a desperate attempt to defend it.
So what about the Russian interest in Bakhmut in terms of its strategic importance? Has that been overstated?
No, I don't think it's been overstated, because it represents an important element in the strategic defensive line that the Ukrainians have built over the past 8 years in eastern Ukraine, in Donbas region. However, taking over Bakhmut will not resolve much for the Russians, because what the Ukrainians will do, whatever they will be able to pull out of almost encircled city, will then be thrown back towards a new defensive barrier that the Ukrainians are currently building further westwards on kind of almost like the outskirts of the Donbas region. And the Russians will still have to storm that defensive lane. So it's almost like this battle. Look, I mean, the significance of this battle, which initiated as almost like a tactical fight at the first place, was magnified by the sheer magnitude of the forces that both sides managed to commit to the battle. According to various estimates, the Ukrainian defenders have about a force of 40 to 50,000 strong personnel that were fighting for Bakhmut and adjacent areas at any given time. I think the size of the Russian force would be something similar. So we're talking about almost like 100,000 troops fighting for a tiny place on the map of Ukraine. And that's what really makes this battle symbolic. But beyond Bakhmut, there are many more battles to fight for both the Russians, as many more strongholds to defend for the Ukrainians. So I don't think it will be a major breakthrough, although the symbolism of the battle, because both sides just managed to elevate it to such level of magnitude, would certainly be very, very important factor to determine the future, the aftermath of the battle and the future follow-on of this war this year.
Alexey, I don't know which languages you speak, given your name, okay, but there's a word in Ukrainian, and my pronunciation will be terrible. It's bezdorozhye. Bezdorozhye, or something like that. In Russian, it's rasputitsa. That sucking black mud that comes after the winter. Spring has begun. It's the first, past the 1st of March. That, as far as Ukrainians and Russians, means it's the start of spring. So what next?
What next? Well, you know, the battlefield will see the outbursts of the rich Ukrainian soil, which will slow down the advancement of mechanized columns. It will slow down the use of crossfield roads for logistical supplies of the transit, bearing in mind that Ukraine now is the world's most heavily mined country in the world. So it's not like you've got a lot of space to maneuver about without hitting a mine. But I don't think it will slow down the fighting, because there would be parts of Ukraine that continue to have a degree of frost, although eventually those areas will also warm up. Yes, the Bezdorozhye or Rasputikatsa, they are synonyms in both Ukrainian and Russian languages, meaning effectively the same, would somehow slow down the intensity of the fighting, perhaps affect the maneuver of the forces, but the ferocity and the tempo would remain unchanged, because both sides understand that this year is likely to be the decisive year of the war.
Yeah, history shows that many attacking armies have themselves been destroyed by those words that you pronounce so beautifully, Alexey. Thank you so much indeed, Alexey Muraviev. Really appreciate the analysis, always.